Bé, com us hem dit, eren ben bé 5 minuts.
Well, as we said, we're going to have a short 5-minute break, so we will move on to the next session for today.
Because most of our panelists today are from other parts of the world. This session is called Data in Action, New Time Use Surveys for Innovative Policies. And we wanted to invite different people that are working on time use data so that we can better understand how they are working on it, how it is used across the world, and what we can expect or what we can get out of this data. So I would like to invite to the stage Jessamine Encarnacion from UN Women. She's the Interregional Advisor on Gender Statistics. Welcome. We have also Juha, I'm sorry for my pronunciation, Haramo, Senior Statistician at Statistics Finland, welcome. And Xavier Quadras, Director of the Statistical Institute of Catalonia. And online we will have Eniel Ninka, the Team Leader for Health, Time Use, Household and Household Budget Surveys at Eurostat. So welcome everyone. So, as I said, the idea of this session is to understand which data we have and how we can use it. How is it already being used in many cases? And we have people from all over the world, so we have a very broad spectrum of different time use data. We will start with Jessamine as advisor in the Gender Statistics UN Women. You have a very broad view from many countries, so we wanted to better understand what are success stories on time use surveys and their use in each of the countries.
Yes, thank you, Adriana, and I hope I can show my slide. And the clicker, please. So yes, thank you so much, and again, thank you to Time Use Initiative, of course, Martha, for the invitation for us, UN Women, to be able to share our success stories, our experiences on time use. So again, the bias will be coming here. Our point of view is always, of course, women's economic empowerment when we talk about time use surveys. So from us, it's really enabling women's economic agency, autonomy, and well-being. And being UN Women, we are looking at two things, also from the normative perspective, policy landscape, but at the same time from improving the evidence-based on women's economic empowerment. And for this particular session, I will highlight our efforts towards more and better time use data, which is part of our Women Count program. So just very briefly, our Women Count program is our global gender data program. So we have seen 3 interrelated challenges. I will not delve into details on that, but rather on the solutions that we have presented or supported our countries. So normally it would be around increasing data production. That's the traditional way of supporting countries. But in our Women Count program, we're taking a holistic approach, meaning we're helping countries to have a gender-sensitive national statistical system. So meaning, aside from a time use perspective, we have very specific interventions on time use because 4 of our thematic topics, one of which is women's economic empowerment, and therefore we're investing on countries in terms of their time use initiatives. So for data collection, we have supported 12 countries in phase 1 and phase 2, 35 countries in phase 2, but as not just improving their data, but rather also improving their accessibility and likewise use of data. There's always that intent to link data, that time use data that was produced and how it's actually used. And making sure there's also creating an enabling environment because it's something that we wanted to make sure that it's not a one-off activity. Now, specifically on time use survey data collection, the question that we always ask our partner countries is that when they ask for support for time use survey, we don't accept responses such as, so that we can monitor SDG 5.4.1 only. It's a matter of what is your specific policy need, information need? Because we cannot just have a survey just because we have a data gap or we want to know an interesting number, but rather what is the specific policy or program that you would want to do, that you would want to implement. So sometimes the story for us is that policy information needs is basically driving our support for data production, or sometimes data is already there and they didn't know how to use the data, and then it's driving policy action. So these are the two types of modalities that we are looking at. It's either the policy driving data or data driving the policy. Now, with regards to women count particularly, we have supported 12 countries in time use surveys, whether I will not delve into much details on this, but right now we're at phase 2 of our program from 2022 to end next year. Out of the 12 countries that we have supported in phase 1, we are, of course, continuing work with them. It's not a one-off exercise with them. It's now focusing more on how do we disseminate the data, how do we communicate it to other data users, not just Ministry of Women, how do we use it for policy and programs. Now, also in phase 2, aside from continuing work, we have done 27 new time use data-related work, whether it's on the survey, whether it's reprocessing data, whether it's on further development of methodologies or satellite accounts. Now, the main meat of the story, what are the success stories? Just to say, I will just highlight 3 stories, Bangladesh, Kenya, as well as Senegal. So for Bangladesh, for us, it became a success story because it was very clear, first and foremost, that the Parliament of Bangladesh has actually requested for a time use survey to create satellite accounts. So it's really from the highest level and leadership of government that wanted the time use survey, and therefore that's already a political will, political commitment. Secondly, not only from government, but also from non-state actors. The civil society wanted to change the narrative that when homemakers are asked, what are you doing? They always say, oh, we're not working. We don't have, we have free time. But no, it's basically, they wanted to change the narrative on what work actually means to homemakers.
Sorry. Technical issues.
Yeah. Were you not able to hear me well earlier?
I think that in the room, yes, but for the streaming is the issue.
I see. It's too many.
With the light, I don't know if we can.
And now it's
Too many things at once.
even the air. So probably I can continue because I'm still
Yeah.
sleeping.
Yeah?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So with the highest political commitment, we are able to support their first ever time use in 2020 and likewise produce satellite accounts in partnership with ADB, with the Asian Development Bank. Now, what has been the success story? Since then, they are now working for a national unpaid care work program. They have the National Women's Development Policy Action and likewise their gender strategy. It's now being informed by that. And likewise, it's being used by the civil society to fuel behavioral change. So it's basically changing stereotypes and social norms. And at least from the statistical point of view, also my bias coming in here, more people now are more trained within the statistics office. They're now not just on time use data, but also on gender data. Now, with regards to Kenya, they had their national development plan, and in their national development plan, they have particularly prioritized unpaid care and domestic work, that they need the information and likewise they need the policy for a national care policy. And it's likewise articulated in their gender sector plan. So again, we supported their first ever time use and likewise their development of the satellite accounts. Now, what they do have is basically from the time use survey, they were able to do a national care needs assessment. They're able to assess what's the supply, what's the demand for the care sector, what do we have with regards to health sector, to the domestic workers, etc. And then we are also able to do review of legislation, government policies, and norms. And obviously, it is time use blind because we don't have data of time use at the time with Kenya. Now it's informing their national care policy. The government has invested $2 million for them to start implementing a national care policy for the next 5 years. And now with greater appreciation of time use data, government has provided more funds to the National Bureau of Statistics, to the National Statistics Office of Kenya, to produce more data that are gender sensitive, that are time use also sensitive. Now, my last case is Senegal. Again, it's also coming from the Office of the President, the request to have satellite accounts, to have unpaid care and domestic work data. So thus, they produce it in 2021 and 2023, respectively. Now, they do have an existing women's empowerment policy, but it was way back in 2011 when it was designed, when no time use survey data was available. And now they're integrating a perspective, so basically it's time use blind. So now they're integrating a perspective on time use aspects. They do have women's work reduction program. Now with the availability of time use, now they're incorporating how can we tap further modern tools, technology, and how to reduce unpaid care work. And then we're also within, it's not even just the programs and policies, but also capacity building within ministries. Within the Ministry of Women, they have now instituted or created a Women's Empowerment Directorate. Now they've seen the disparity of unpaid care and domestic work. Now, I'm just saying, just very briefly, just to highlight that time use data that we have supported countries is not on almost always the national time use survey, but likewise some rapid gender assessments that we have done during the crisis. So during COVID, we have supported 52 countries, particularly for rapid gender assessments. In a span of 2 years. And since then, it has been used, for example, by Chile. They said, the minister herself has said that to understand to what degree the crisis was impacting women, they were able to identify the need for a public policy and therefore have provided more resources that are more gender sensitive. We've also seen this in Maldives, wherein they have seen how impacted the informal sector was and how it was greatly affecting women in the informal sector, and therefore they have deliberately and intentionally targeted women in informal sector through their income support allowance. So these are just some of the success stories, if I may say. So what's our next step? Like basically from our end, we're still following our framework from the Women Count program, that we're not just providing support for data production, but making sure that we are consciously linking data use with data policies. I was telling Martha earlier that it was such an eye-opener also for me, from UN Women, to what extent time use survey data can likewise be used, not from a care policy point of view, but also from time policies in general. And this is something that I will basically bring home also to UN Women and to also our partner countries. So that it's not just like, care policy, but also the other types of policies that we can use. And likewise, so now we're working on a multi-country analysis to produce new or more policy-relevant data, time use or policy-relevant data, so that we're going beyond SDG 5.4.1 or unpaid care and domestic work. We have Joanne here, Joanne Roman Garcia, who's working with us to help other partner countries to further exploit the time use survey data that we have beyond what is traditional indicators that we do have. And likewise, it's something that we will continue to learn from the group, from everyone, to how to further exploit and maximize the use of time use.
Thank you very much, Jessamine. Very interesting to see how time use data can be used in many, many aspects. And I think that you pointed a key aspect, how this data is actionable, right? How we translate it into policies. And from UN, from all over the world, as we saw, we moved towards the European Union with Eniel Ninke, the team leader for health time use household budget surveys at Eurostat. We have him online, but we wanted also to reflect on a tool that the European Union has, which is the Harmonized European Time Use Survey, which actually could also be used by all these countries to review and see how they are doing, how we can advance, where are the weak points, and where policy is needed. So we asked him to explain us what's the state of play of the time use survey and what are a bit the plans for the future. So welcome, Eniel. I hope technically is okay. No? Okay, good. Oh. Okay, so he's gone down. Sorry. So maybe what we can do. Okay. So until, no, okay, we have him back. Hello, Eniel.
Hello.
Okay, so I was just introducing you and your position, and I will ask you to explain us what's the state of the European Harmonized Time Use Survey and what are the plans for the future.
Yes, thank you very much, Ariadna, for your invitation, first of all, and your kind invitation, and apologize, I had a hiccup. About HITUS, so the Harmonized European Time Use Survey. Well, as you might know, it is conducted every 10 years, so with 10-year intervals. The last wave, and the current wave actually, is the 2021. The reference year, the 2020, is purely theoretical actually, as countries in Europe are free to decide whether to run or not the survey and when. As a consequence, this 2020 data collection is still ongoing, in fact. At the end, we at Eurostat will likely, and here I stress the word likely, have data from 20 countries out of the 27 in EU. But we also consider Europe as a continent, not just the European Union. So out of those 20 countries, 15 are EU members, which represent approximately 88% of the EU27 population. We will have also Norway and other 4 candidate countries. Out of those 20 countries that I mentioned, 13 have already finished the field work, and 6 of them have delivered the data to Eurostat. 5 are still in the field work, and 2 are in preparation with a survey start scheduled in 2025. As I said, member states have actually no obligation to deliver data to Eurostat. In fact, the data delivery as well as adherence to our recommendations or HITUS guidelines are voluntary and done on the basis of a gentleman's agreement. As you recognize, the situation negatively impacts quality of time use data at EU level. In addition to EU aggregates, which cannot be calculated, 3 dimensions of quality are mostly impacted. I would like to give you a bit more of information on this. First, it is relevance, or the degree to which data meets user needs. This is severely impacted, in my opinion, when we consider that 12 member states do not collect time use data at all. Timeliness, or the gap between the reference year and publication year, which will be 7 or 8 years if we consider the last country that will probably deliver the data by 2027. And third, comparability of the data across countries and across time periods also suffers if some countries do not collect data at all, or they do not participate in the time use surveys, and when there are gaps between countries or between the first and the last country participating in the same way. As I said, we have countries that started in 2020 and countries that will continue up to 2025 or 26. At this point, you might ask, why do countries not collect time use data? And my answer is 2 words: burden and cost. Time use surveys poses high burden on NSIs in terms of human and financial resources, and also a high burden on respondents, in particular the diary part. It's very, very time consuming and very heavy for the respondent. The survey is costly to conduct as it requires careful preparation, well-trained interviewers, a lengthy field work, laborious time entry and data cleaning. The cost-benefit analysis is often not in favor of the benefits, unfortunately. In my opinion, this happens because benefits are not correctly weighted, and this consideration brings me to the last point, the richness of time use data. Here, I don't want to repeat myself because we had the previous presentation talking about this virtuous circle, but we all agree that time use data offer unique perspectives and their value is acknowledged, particularly to measure unpaid household work, well-being, and gender equality. Time use data are also critical to guide policies and research related to changing work practices, commuting and transportation, as well as education, health, culture, environment, and sports. Additionally, the data can provide interesting insights related to life conditions of certain population groups, such as older people, children, or people with disabilities, which are also high in our agenda at EU Commission. Over time, time use survey provide valuable insights in the changing patterns of how people use their time and their impact of the new technologies like internet have on people allocating their time. Therefore, time use data, I would say, is fundamental for the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of a broad range of public policies. In particular, they are very necessary and they are actually the direct input for monitoring progress towards the achievement of the SDG indicator, the 5.4.1 on the proportion of time spent on unpaid domestic care work by sex, age, and location. But moreover, they also contribute to the evidence needed for monitoring other SDG goals and targets. To conclude, what are our plans, so Eurostat plans for the next wave, which will be probably by 2030 or a bit later. So first of all, we would like to, and we are already starting the process of revising the HITUS activity code list so that it would, first of all, allow us in Europe to measure time spent in unpaid domestic and care work to answer those policy needs that I mentioned, like monitoring progress of SDG indicators. And second, with the aim of being better aligned to the international classification of activities for time use statistics, or the ICATUS, which is maintained by the United Nations Statistical Division, UNSD. Second, we would like to propose a light survey, including a light diary and a light questionnaire, 2 instruments, with the aim of offering to the countries, or serving in a way 2 objectives. First of all, to allow those countries that do not collect time use data at all to start doing so. And second, to allow the countries that already collect time use data to increase the frequency of their surveys, with the final aim to make time use survey more and more relevant in the future. Thank you.
Very interesting, because I think that both presentations so far highlight the need of time use data for sure, but the need as well to sell it, to understand how they can help policies with this data in a way that allows us to have more and better time use data. And I also collect your idea of light time use survey or the rapid assessments you were mentioning as a way to at least have something that allows us to advance and this way build our case for better time use data. So from this more, I would say, overview of time use data, we go to 2 specific cases that will be part, I guess, of the new wave of Eurostat as well. We will continue with Juha, is that correct? How do I pronounce it? From Finland, and we asked him to explain us what have been the main findings of the new wave of the time use survey in Finland.
Thank you for having me. It has been a great learning experience to find out what has been done in the field of time policies. Okay, let's go to my topic. It's the latest time use survey in Finland and the main findings of the survey. So Statistics Finland has been carried out a 5 time use survey for now, and the last 3 ones has been carried out by guidelines of HETUS. And the 5th and the last data collection was during the COVID pandemic. So some results could and also have been affected by the pandemic. So let's go to the main findings. First, paid and domestic work. The time used by men for paid work has decreased, and the time that used for domestic work has increased. For women, there has been decrease in both these activities. The time spent especially on childcare has increased among men. So, for the very first time, the total working time is equal. So this is a quite historical result, but is it a historical turning point? We will see that, or is it just a result of the pandemic and lockdown actions? It remains to be seen. On the other hand, you can see that there has been a trend for decades. Okay, mothers of the small children do the most domestic work, that's not a surprise. And fathers of small children do the most paid work. Although fathers of the small children do the most paid work, they have still more free time than the mothers. On the other hand, couples under 45 without children have more or less same work input, but the things change when they get children. Okay, let's go to the content of the domestic work. Although there has been some convergence in the content of the domestic work done by men and women, for example, they both use about the same amount of time of shopping, and employed men spend even slightly more time to childcare than employed women. That's quite amazing in Finland. There are still traditional gender roles. Women spend more time than men on cooking, cleaning, and washing dishes. Men, on the other hand, spend more time to traditional men's work, such as repair, construction work, etc. Now let's move to free time. So, most popular of all free time activities was and still is watching TV. You can see that here, sorry. This means watching TV, video content, whatever video content, regardless of the device. So next I will focus more deeply on some leisure activities that have been changed. First, time spent on reading. As you can see, time spent on reading sorry, has decreased almost in all age groups. Young men read at least 9 minutes a day. The trend has been there since already the 1980s, but you could have been assumed that the pandemic should increase the reading because you have more time at home, but the opposite happened. Same happened with the time of socializing, but that's not a surprise. But it is that despite the rise of the social media, of course, the lockdown actions during the pandemic has reduced social interaction. But there has also been a trend. So, the golden age of social interaction was 1970s and 1980s. It is especially evident on the social interactions that took place on weekdays and Sundays. The collapse from previous decades was particularly evident in late weekdays and Saturdays, probably keeping restaurants and clubs closed, and lockdown actions of cultural events has reduced the social interaction. But in general, social interactions have decreased significantly already since the 1990s. So what is pleasing that, on the other hand, the time spent exercising has increased since the 1980s. There has been growing trend exercising among people aged over 14, and let's hope that this trend remains even after the pandemic. So let's move to the screen time. As was mentioned yesterday, the screen time is also related to the public health. Screen time has almost doubled in early 20s from the late 1980s. The growth compared to the situation a decade ago has been especially strong in the age groups of 15 to 24 and over 64. So let's move to total screen time. This means screen time of all activity connection with the screen, both main and secondary activity, in free time, screen time, working, study time, everything is included. But of course, most of the screen time is leisure screen time. So Finns spent almost 4.5 hours per day in front of various screens during the pandemic. The screen time was longest for those aged of 15 to 24, on average 5 hours and 46 minutes per day. So, and the screen time according to state of family cycle, singles under age of 45 who live on their own spend most time in front of screens, almost 6 hours a day. In general, those without children spend most of the time in front of screens, have the time to do that. So, and it is not surprised that couples with small children have shorter screen time. So, to sum up, some changes in the time use compared to previous decades. It is not always clear whether the changes are caused by the pandemic or part of the longer trend, or perhaps both. Some changes are clearly caused by lockdown actions. Some are part of a longer trend. Another question is whether some changes are more or less permanent. We will see that in the next time use survey in the next 10 years. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. So thank you for this overview. Very interesting to see exactly what you said, no? How this would be maintained in time, or if we will see any changes. Maybe with the other countries we can also compare whether this is a trend in the waves we are doing now. So we will close this round with Xavier Quadras, Director of the Statistical Institute in Catalonia. Here in Catalonia we are in the process of collecting the data on time use, but we are really waiting, hoping for it. So we invited Xavier here to explain us how this time use survey is being done and coordinated. Gràcies, Xavier. Endavant, quan vulguis. Crec que tens... vale, perfecte.
Thank you, Xavier. Thank you very much for your invitation. We welcome it, and we're very grateful for your attention. I'm going to try to describe the aims of our time use survey. It has got background in this kind of survey. I'll try to explain this third wave of the time use survey in Catalonia, what the new developments are, And I'd also like to discuss the importance of time use data to tackle the future challenges of the national accounting system currently under discussion. The change is meant to take place in 2025, and I believe, as you will see, that this kind of survey data will become more important as a result. I need not explain the purposes of time use surveys. What I will emphasize is that in Catalonia, this survey is carried out by IDESCAT, the Catalan Institute of Statistics. I have two colleagues here, and the work is usually not done by the director. It's done by the deputy director for production and the head of the area for the economy and society. They're the ones who do more of this actual work. The idea is to study the distribution, duration, and times of activities and use this to inform policy. This is something you all know quite well. Something we would really like to highlight is that we work according to the HETUS guidelines. So we follow Eurostat's recommendations as far as we can to ensure that the collection of our data means that it is as homogeneous and as comparable as possible to what is being collected in other or in most European countries. In the different waves of the time use survey in Europe, Catalonia took part in two waves. First, 2002-2003. This was done jointly with the Spanish National Institute of Statistics. The second wave took place in 2010-2011, and it was carried out by IDESCAT on its own. And these are the covers of the relevant publications. Here we have one chart by way of example showing how the kind of information we have has evolved. We have paid activities and unpaid activities, or gainful activities and non-gainful activities for both men and women. We have differences, and we expect differences in the third wave as well. So what about the third wave? It is the 2023-2024 time use survey. As I said, we intend to carry it out following the HETUS guidelines, Eurostat's guidelines. We commissioned the Center for Demographic Studies to do some of the early work. And here we have who is somebody who played a crucial role there. And at that stage, creating the technical project, we were very careful to collect information from researchers and from data users because we wanted to improve the content of our survey to align with the needs of users. All of the people we interviewed highlighted the importance of time use data, and they also voiced their requests. Not all of their requests could be met, of course, because surveys are burdensome in general. This one is particularly burdensome, and so you can't always cover everything. There's an issue of cost, of course, the cost to us, but needing to achieve a representative sample, but there's also the cost to the survey participants the burden of filling in this kind of survey, which, as mentioned, can be quite high. Field work began in November last year, and we're close to completion. Some new developments that we would like to highlight are as follows. We have a new territorial breakdown to share the results. We have used a Degorba stratification variable, which indicates the degree of urbanization, basically. We are trying to get more representative, a more representative population of households. We've increased the size of the sample. There are some new questions, some of them suggested by Eurostat, others by Idescat. And we also moved from a survey that only consisted of personal interviews to another type of survey with multi-channel collection, including online, in-person, or remote, which is also something that has a positive impact on costs.
Regarding the stratification of the sample, and we have 14 territories covered. Within each of the territories, we had the metropolitan area of Barcelona and the city of Barcelona itself. Then within the city of Barcelona, there was 5 groupings of the different neighborhoods. We grouped them according to criteria, taking into account the similarity and the socioeconomic index, which has been published for a few years now by Idescat. Regarding the new questions which were included, which were proposed by Idescat, there's one on how they identify according to gender, and also some that had to do with the reduction of the working day. And one of the new ones here is also, of course, remote working, teleworking, because it wouldn't make sense to have a survey of this kind without asking about teleworking. And then some of the questions wanted to make a distinction between the actual fulfillment of activities and the planning of activities, because we know that in homes, this is something that we cannot just look away from, because very often what is most important is to plan for activities and have them on the line. Right now, we are ending the consultations regarding the national accounts from 2025. And with this new system for national accounts, there are different lines for the reform, which are important. Some are technical in nature regarding globalization and digitalization. But in this case, amongst the proposals which are being forwarded for the new model of national accounts, there are proposals that want to include a better way of taking into account well-being and sustainability within the ways that they are being accounted for at the national level. Basically, at the national level, we take into account the GDP, which is the indicator of progress or well-being, which is probably the most known one, but it's probably not the best. There's been a lot of criticism about it. And therefore, one of the lines of reform is to go beyond GDP and therefore include some of these other considerations around well-being and sustainability. So, as I say, going beyond the strict calculation of GDP. Some of the reforms are the ones that you see on the screen. It have to do with the distribution of income and wealth in different social groups. Other aspects such as work, education, human capital, and healthcare access, and also the impact on the environment. But I'd like to stress that there's special emphasis placed on accounting for all the activities that are carried out beyond the market activities, and especially unpaid domestic work. In this scheme here, you can see the national accounts were extended with these new considerations, and therefore we include in these extended or satellite accounts these new considerations. But these could not be constructed without the data of the time use surveys. So these accounts of non-paid work and domestic work, and so these extended accounts or surveys, we propose it to be done at least every 5 years. And there should be a physical breakdown of leisure time, time dedicated to other activities which are not included in other aspects. So a complete accounting for of the use of time. There's also proposals for education. So take into account the time dedicated to learning, or in the case of health, the measures which offer health assistance and social assistance in long term, and take into account unpaid work of domestic service. So, to sum up, there are novelties there when it comes to the questions and the design of the sample. And then we have basic information, which is really important for us, especially taking into account the statistic actions in order to create gender equality indicators, and also to construct the SDG indicators for the satellite account for domestic production or home production. And we must not forget that this type of data will probably be consolidated even more in the future, because we'll receive the support due to the institutionalization of this type of accounts with the future national accounting system, which is what most countries use, including, obviously, what is used in the European Union. So thank you very much for your attention.
Gràcies, Xavier. Crec que ara encara
Thank you very much, Xavier. I'm sure that we are even more eager now to receive the data. So we've been talking about how important data is in order to project new policies, and now very important things are also going to be taken into account, that we're going beyond GDP and including time data.
Just to say, now we have the floor open for questions. We have Eniel online, we have Jessamine, Joha, and Xavier. And yes, whoever has a question, we have the microphone there. Now it's the time. And we have also online people. I don't know if they have questions, but... Oh.
Thank you all for your presentations. I'm particularly curious as to why, and I hope this is not a political question, but I'm wondering why there's a Catalan time use survey when Spain is also conducting its time use survey.
Xavier.
And maybe what differences are there in the survey itself?
Yeah, well, there is a limitation for national surveys, which basically is that with the sample they usually have, they have meaningful results at the national level, of course, and at most the regional level. And here in Catalonia, there was this concern about having results which could be representative at a smaller territorial unit. So this is one of the main reasons why this survey has been conducted at the regional level here. My guess is that with some work, they will be comparable because they are being done under the same harmonized guidelines. So we follow the recommendations from Eurostat, and in Spain they do as well. But there might be some differences, but my guess is that they can be put together. Yeah.
Perfect. More questions? If you can introduce yourself before asking the question.
Okay, soc Cristina Rovira.
I'm Cristina Rovira from the Catalan Statistics Institute. I have a question for Aniel Ninca. He said that they're now preparing the new guidelines for 2030, at least that's what I understood. So I'm wondering whether for the fourth wave, if this statistic operation will be compulsory or will it still be a recommendation for countries? Thank you very much.
Aniel.
Yes, thank you for the question, and apologize if I was not precise. As you know, we have a new regulation, the regulation EU 2019-1700. This regulation comprises also the time use survey, but time use survey remains voluntary. For those countries that would like to conduct the time use survey, then they will have to follow the guidelines and then they will have to send the data. But participation in the fourth wave remains voluntary. This was the result of this negotiation when this regulation was formulated.
Thank you, Aniel. Any other questions? We have Joan.
So my question, I'm Joan Garcia from the Centre d'Estudis Demogràfics. And my question is a little bit for everybody in the panel. It's about the data dissemination and the access to data, because I think all of you are data producers, Eurostat, Statistics Finland, Catalonia, and also UN Women, because you are supporting some surveys. So how are you planning to disseminate this data, the access? Because sometimes the process to access the data is really complicated. You have to apply, you have to present a project, and you have to wait probably a lot of time. In the case of Finland, correct me, but you cannot work with the data if you are not in Finland. So, well, it's not for everybody. Thank you.
If I may ask.
Go ahead, I mentioned.
Okay, if you want to use the microdata, you have to apply it for our research services, but also we are disseminating our data to EU as a HETUS file, and also for the Center for the Time Use Research. And I suppose they are free of charge files, and also I think there was Center of Time Use survey. Center of Time Use survey also dismissed that for a third party, I suppose. But in our website, we published tables almost every activities. But nowadays they are only in Finnish because we don't have any resources to make them English. But they are free of charge and everybody can access them.
Okay, Jessica, if you want to.
Yeah. Thank you, Johan, for the question. So for us, 2 points. One, with regards to microdata access. I think our default within UN Women when we support countries in terms of the time use survey is that to require them to make this accessible, to make this as a public good, as it should be. However, that's the ideal scenario. However, it's not always the case because in some cases, countries that we work with, they have very specific statistical laws or basically statistical policy in some cases from national statistical offices in terms of what they disseminate for free or what they disseminate with pay to the public. So I think ultimately we still defer to the official or statistical policy that our partner national statistics offices provide. Now, the second point with regards to the broader point on that data dissemination, I think it's also something that we are more strategically discussing with our partner countries, that we, as much as possible, would like to discuss with them not just dissemination, but rather communication. And in this discussion with this dissemination, because we always think it's just a matter of distributing what they already have, but what we always say is to communicate, to make sure that what they are distributing is actually understood, and therefore higher likelihood of uptake and use, because that's something that we always try to promote, that when we support them in time use survey, it is only successful if they are able to demonstrate to us a specific policy or program that has been incorporated. And in that, the communication part, we make sure that it's from the stage zero, if I may say, that there is a communication plan from the get-go until the end.
Yeah. We go back to how we use the data to actually make policies, right? So maybe Eniel, if you want for mentions, answer also to Johan in terms of dissemination.
Yes. Thank you, Anne. You are one of the users of our data. You might know that Eurostat disseminates microdata. We have disseminated the last wave for the 2020. So the current wave, we are still collecting the data coming from the countries. They flow slowly. So basically what we can do is that we can collect this data, and then we need to anonymize those data, and then we need to reduce the risk of, to mitigate the risk of identification. Because you might know, or you should know, that the data are disseminated by Eurostat, but they belong to the member states, so to the countries. So once we need to agree a certain level of dissemination, and then we need to agree all together whether we can disseminate or not, and what we can disseminate or not. And then the process, yes, it's true, is a bit lengthy, because first the requests come to us. Once we agree at technical level, then the request goes to each of the countries. We need to approve it. We can see whether this can be improved in the future, but I mean, I cannot promise this now. As for when this data will be available, as I said in my presentation, we still have countries that have to start the field work. So basically, we will have two major countries that will start it only in 2025. So the whole 2025 and a bit of 2026 will be the field work, the data collection. Then countries have no obligation to deliver the data, but let's assume that they will deliver the data. They need some time to process the data and transmit the data to Eurostat, and then we on our side need to validate and then process again the data. And then after that, we need to start this process of anonymization and identification of the respondents, mitigation, so the risk of identification. So it's a lengthy process, just because since the data transmission is voluntary to Eurostat, we don't have all the data at once, but yes, from time to time, so it will take some time. unfortunately, this is the situation.
Thank you, Aniel. And last but not least, Xavier, maybe you can.
Yeah, well,
also
in our case, we have the data from the previous survey in our webpage, and I don't see this policy changing, so we'll have it, of course, after all the work that has to be done in order to have the data ready for everyone, anonymizing, etc. But in principle, it will be available to everyone.
Perfect. So we have one last question for the speakers.
Basically, thank you very much for the inspiring presentation that you did. I think that it's good to see that other countries around the world are doing the first ever time policy, so it's good to see that there is a trend there. And Aniel was commenting that in Europe we have more countries than ever doing time use data. Again, no, it shows this interest on having data on that. Unfortunately, I don't really like the timings that you are saying, Aniel. I know that is what you can do it, but it's a bit curious, no, that we are trying to do the second wave in 2020 and we will have the results complete altogether in 2027. So time takes time, but this is a long time, no? So my question for you links a bit with Joan. That is, as you were saying, these surveys are quite costly, no? But how we make sure that people is aware that we have these surveys? Both institutions and academy, no? Both of them. So here, I was thinking is, do you do like any kind of festival of data, where the institutions that are paying for these results are showing these to the researchers of their country or even in the European region or regionals? How we can generate more awareness about this data and their impacts?
I understand it was perennial, so go ahead. But
Yes, thank you very much for this question, which brings me to what I had already written as a final statement for this conference. We need to better communicate to the public and to our policymakers, especially the policymakers, the richness of time use data. As you might agree with me, no policies can be done without data. And of course, we can, in this room, we are, or you are there because you believe in this, but as the lady in the room asked, what are we going to do? Well, from Eurostat, I can say that time use data was used in one of the hackathons of the NTTS New Techniques and Technologies for Statistics conference. We used it as so that we could give to the researchers the possibility to use those data, microdata, and to see what they could, what kind of research they could do with that. There is an international association for time use research, and you have the president. Of the association there. So there, this is the biggest forum where researchers on time use gather together and discuss. We do some activities, of course, in the member states, but yes, we can certainly do more. Of course, at Eurostat, we are only data providers at EU level, so we can only are responsible for the calculation of EU aggregates, which is not possible in this case because time use data are flowing only from 15 member states. But yes, we are doing the best of our effort to increase the frequency of the collection. Possibly this will not change, but at least the number of countries participating in the time use surveys. This is our biggest ambition. Thank you.
Thank you, Aniel. So since you mentioned that this was your final statement, I will take advantage of that, and I will ask our speakers to have a final comment if they want to finish the session. We start the other way around, maybe with Xavier.
The only thing that I would like to say is that time use surveys mean great effort from the budgetary and logistics perspective, especially for modest or small-sized institutes such as ours. So the project has been quite difficult. We have received a lot of support from outside the Institute in order to fulfill our project. So we are very thankful for that support, and we're also very pleased because we think that the project is going forward in optimal technical conditions, and I think that the results will be very interesting. And that is what it should be. That's the most important thing. And of course, when we have the data available for citizens, then obviously we intend to disseminate them as much as possible in order to make them more visible, to share this knowledge, and also make it known how important it is to collect this type of data and use it for economic policies and also in the field of research, and use them ultimately to improve citizens' lives. Thank you, Chair. We are looking forward to them. You have
statement or
maybe I should conclude that as Eniel said, that we must raise the awareness of the possibilities of the time use survey and its meaning of broader measure of human development and human well-being. And in Finland, one of the things we assured that the utility of time use survey is that we, in the planning stage of the time use survey, we take the stakeholders and main users of the time use survey in the planning stage. So that's one of the options that we can raise of the usability of the time use survey. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessamine.
Thank you. Probably my last statement would be really, for us, I mean, data production is just half of the story. Really, data use is the more important part, if I may say, of the story, to make sure that this is why we do our work on gender data, on time use data, is to make sure that it translates to policy or programmatic action so that it can improve women's and girls' lives. And just to our always advocacy to our partners is that there are two things: that there's time use data gap, but also there's also that another gap of data use gap, that sometimes we always forget that data use gap. We always talk about data gaps, and we hold statistical offices or data producers accountable, but it's a shared responsibility as well, that the gap on data use, policymakers and other decision makers should likewise be held accountable, and therefore these two should coexist really and should really work together. So that's always our advocacy.
Fantastic. So let's hope we have better and more time policies supported by better and more time use data in the future. Thank you very much. Thank you all also for being here and participating. We are going to close this session for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just so you know, for the program, we have now a coffee break outside, and after that we will have here the assembly of the local and regional governments network, and for the Catalan researchers we are having a workshop on the time use survey. It is in Catalan without translation, just so you know. In another room you will see the signs outside on how to get there at 11:45.